Right. Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. My apologies for all the shuffling around. I just was not in control of my schedule today. Today we're learning Maseches Gittin Daf Lamed Hey, and we're starting on the second line. We'll be learning until about 2/3 of the way down on Lamed Hey Amid Beis, and then we'll stop and pick up with the balance of Lamed Hey and Lamed Vav for the next day. If all of my flights are on time, near Hashem, I should be home and in person for Daf Yomi. If anything changes, I'll keep you posted. Lamed Hey Amid Aleph, second line. Nimnu Umila Hashpia. We had restricted women from making a shavua. If you look back at the Mishnah on the top of Lamed, on the bottom of Lamed Daled Amid Beis, you'll see the Mishnah there says that Ein Almana Nifras Minichse Samamel B'Shvua, that women who were almanos, they had to make a shvua in order to collect anything. And then the next line of that Mishnah says Nimnu Umila Hashpia, that we don't actually allow them to make that shvua anymore. And we'll discuss what that means today. So the Gemara says Nimnu Umila Hashpia, we stop them from doing that. My time. What is the reason why the Mishnah said that we no longer require a woman to make a shvua, in particular an almana, to make a shvua, to collect things from the asomim, from her husband's children, from her family? So says the Gemara, Rav Kahana had a whole lengthy story as to what he was concerned about. Let's dig into the story. Damar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. We don't know if it was Rav Kahana or Rav. There was a man during the times of famine. He took his dinar zav, he took a gold coin, and he was hifkid. He gave it to a woman to hold on to a woman who was an almana. And she hid it inside a container of flour. And then, unbeknownst to her, she took out her cup scoop when she was making challah. She didn't realize that the coin was in there. And she cooked it into, it's like shlisel challah, but accidental. She cooked the coin into the challah, and then unisanaso le'ani. That's a problem. She ended up giving away, the almana ended up giving away the coin. So let's say Chaim, the investor, he decides to take his coin and gives it to Rachel, the almana. So Rachel, the almana, accidentally baked it into a challah and gave it to someone. So the Gemara says, Liyamim, after a couple of days, Ba Bal Hadinar, the guy who owned the coin, Chaim, came back to the house of Rachel, the almana, and said, V'amarla, Havili dinari, I'd like my coin back. And she said, Amrale, she said, I don't have your coin, but Yehana Sam Hamaves Be'echad Mibaneha Shal Osa Isha, Im Nehenesi Midinarcha Klum. May the Sam Hamaves, may there be a poison that will affect one of her children, referring to herself, in the event that I benefited, she says, from any aspect of your coin. I am a yashar woman. I did not take your coin. I don't know where it is, but I didn't do anything wrong. Amru, they said, Lo hayu yamimu atemat shemes echad mibaneha rachamana litzlan. Unfortunately, one of her children died, which is difficult to understand because she didn't, certainly not beknownst to her, she didn't do anything wrong. So the Gemara says, when they heard about this, Amru, if a woman who really didn't do anything wrong is being held accountable to such a great degree, and she, God forbid, she lost a child, the same thing will for sure be true in regards to someone who's a liar. And that's what we were concerned about. So says the Gemara, my taima iansha. Why is it that she was punished? It wasn't her intention to do anything wrong. That was not her desire. So why is it that she was punished? Says the Gemara, the ishtar shila makom dinar. Because what ended up happening is that when she put in the coin into the flour, that therefore meant that there was less flour in the bread. And because there was less flour in the bread, she shortchanged one of the aniyim when she gave over the challah to a poor person. Such a strict din. That's what the Gemara says is what we were concerned about. It asks the Gemara, Umay mi shenishba be'emes. Why did it say nishba be'emes? She wasn't saying the truth. She didn't know she was lying, but she wasn't saying the truth. She, in fact, did something wrong. What did she do? She didn't do a proper shmirah. She was supposed to watch this thing. And what she ended up doing is baking it into a challah. There's a degree of negligence there. She didn't properly watch over. So says the Gemara, why are you saying it's misha nishba be'emes? That's not right. So the Gemara responds, it's kim misha nishba be'emes. From her perspective, she had done nothing wrong. She didn't know what had happened. We know the story. She didn't know the story. And therefore, she was making a claim that was perfectly innocent. She didn't realize what had happened. So says the Gemara, perhaps because of a case like this, the case of Rav Kahana, perhaps that's why we have in our Mishnah of Nimnu Milahashbia, that we don't want a woman to make a shvuah because the halachos of shvuos are very chamor, and we're afraid that, God forbid, she'll be tripped up either intentionally or even accidentally, and a terrible result can happen. So says the Gemara, that can't be why our Mishnah says Nimnu Milahashbia, that we stopped women from making this shvuah. Why not? Because, says the Gemara, imishum ha, if this were to be true, that we're concerned about the negative impact of making a shvuah, so then my iria almana. Why then would our Mishnah drill in and only speak about an almana? After all, if our concern is the power of a shvuah and that a person could get tripped up in a shvuah, then afilu grusha nami. The same thing should be true for a grusha. Why would we have it be that it's only true by an almana? Alama, Amar Reb Zera, why is it that Reb Zera taught us, Amar Shmuel, that lo shanu ela almana, aval grusha mashbiin osa? Doesn't make sense. The way that Reb Zera learned the sugya in the name of Shmuel is that we're only talking about a case of almana and not a case of grusha. So therefore, we're really stuck. We had said in our Mishnah that our Mishnah was talking about an almana and that she initially had to make a shvuah to extract anything from the yasomim. Then the Mishnah says, Nimnu lahashbia. If the concern is that a shvuah is so powerful, so why did Reb Zera in the name of Shmuel say that we're only talking about an almana? If it's a concern about shvuos, it should apply across the boards. So a third of the way down, the Gemara says, almana shiny. There's a difference between an almana and a grusha. The primary difference, obviously emotionally, there's a huge difference. An almana lost her husband. But the halachic difference between an almana and a grusha is an almana is still benefiting from the property of the Baal. The grusha is not. And that's what the Gemara calls out. Almana shiny de be'ahi hana de katarcha kame de yasme asya le'oruye hetera. Because she's still helping out around the house and because she's still involved with the yasomim of her husband. So we're afraid that maybe in such a case, we would want to be lenient and make a shvuah, kamash malan, that's not true. But really, seemingly, it's the case that it really should have applied to everything else. We're just teaching a special din by almana. The Gemara then says, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Rav v'Shmuel, the Amri Tarvayu. When do we say this din of nimnu milahashbia, that we don't allow a woman to make a shvuah to capture property from yasomim? When is that true? Lo shana ella, when the shvuah is made bebezdin. A shvuah made in bezdin is the highest form of a shvuah. Aval, in contrast, chutz lebezdin mashbiin osa. This the Gemara says is an interesting spin. Before today, I wouldn't have thought this. There are different levels of shvuos. And here is tip-top shape, is when you make a shvuah in Bezdin, that is numero uno, top of the food chain, the highest possible caliber of a shvuah. And there we're concerned. We're concerned that perhaps a woman would make a shvuah in Bezdin. That's the most severe place to make a shvuah in Bezdin, and we're concerned. However, if she were to make a shvuah not in Bezdin, then perhaps the rules of our Mishnah don't apply. So it's a qualification. Our Mishnah says, Nimnu milahashbia, and therefore the Gemara says that maybe it's only true when it's in Bezdin, but not when it's chutz lebezdin. So therefore the Gemara says, Aval chutz lebezdin mashbiin osa. Asks the Gemara, that doesn't seem to be the case. Eini, is that true that we have a limitation, that we only have the rule that a woman, that an almana should not make a shvuah for shvuahs in Bezdin? After all, the harav, lo megabe ksuva le'armalta. He wouldn't ever allow for a woman to collect a ksuva that way, even if she were to make a shvuah outside of Bezdin. No matter what, Rashi adds this in. No matter what, we wouldn't allow her to collect a ksuva under these circumstances. So says the Gemara, kasha. That's taka, a good point. And the way that we understand Rav in this version is that he actually doesn't really fit within the quote that we said was in his name. Because if you look back a few lines earlier, it says Rav v'Shmuel da'amrei tarvaihu. And then we see that Rav actually doesn't agree with his own comment, which means that something got lost in translation. Then the Gemara says, Besura masnu hachi. In Surah, they taught this din of Rav the way that we just presented it, that Rav didn't fit with the previous Shita. However, Benaharda, in the city of Naharda, there was a different understanding of Rav's comment. We're halfway down on Lamed Hey, Amid Aleph, and the Gemara says as follows. Benaharda, masnu hachi, they learned this sugya a little bit differently. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Lo shanu ela bebezdin. Aval chutz lebezdin mashpiin osa. The Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, not both Rav and Shmuel, just Shmuel. Shmuel says that the rule is that we do allow this woman to make a shvua if she's outside of Bezdin, because a shvua outside of Bezdin is that lower tier, lower level shvua. But we restrict her from making a shavua had she made the shavua in Bezdin, and that's a qualification of our Mishnah. That's how Shmuel understands. And then the Gemara says in this second version about Rav, no, Rav Amar afilu chutz leBezdin nami ein mashbian osa, that we do not allow a woman to make a shavua at all, and this almana is not going to be able to collect a ksuba because there's no way for her to make a shavua. And Rav lataime, de Rav lo megabe ksuvasa le'armalta. Because Rav says that there's no way for her to make a shvua. We don't want her to make a shvua. That's the limitation of our Mishnah of nimnu mila hashbia. We don't want her to make a shvua in Bezdin, and we don't even want her to make a shvua outside of Bezdin. And the Gemara asks, wait 1 second. Vele adra veligbe. Fine. Maybe she shouldn't make a shvua, but the end of our Mishnah on the bottom of Lamed Daled Amud Beis had another suggestion that perhaps, and this was the takana of Rabban Gamliel, perhaps instead of making a shvua, she could make a neder. That's much better. Let her make the neder. That's not so bad. A neder is not on the same level as a shvua. So therefore, the Gemara says as follows. Why is it that we don't trust, according to Rab, why we don't trust her to make a neder? Okay, I understand, Rab, you're concerned about the chumrah of a shvua. No problem. But why can't she make a neder? And the Gemara responds with a historical reality. And the Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, Bishoni de Rab, Kili Nidri. People were being super makel when it came to Nadarim. And because people were being super makel when it came to Nadarim, Rab just wasn't willing to have it. People weren't taking them seriously. So he forbade even the takana of Rabban Gamliel. Very good. Couple of quick stories. The Gemara says, again, 2/3 of the way down on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, Hahida Asoy Lekame de Rav Huna. There was a person, a woman, who came in front of Rav Huna. Omar Allah, he said to her, I'm really sorry. I know you're an almana, but there's nothing I can do to help you. Ma'i ovedlich, de Rav lo megabe ksuba la'armalta. Rav doesn't allow for women who are an armala, women who are an almana, to collect a ksuba. You're not allowed to make a shvur, you're not allowed to make a neder. I'm so sorry. You're trapped, and I can't get you your ksuba. Amrale, she said to him, Midihu taima, isn't the deeper concern of Rav, Eladilma nikitna midi miksuvasi, that perhaps maybe I've already collected something of my ksuba. Remember, we said a couple of lines ago that Rav was concerned about people not taking their nadarim seriously. And maybe she really collected her ksuba already, and she's actually lying about collecting again. So this woman had a great retort. And she said back, to Rav Huna, isn't Rav's concern your Rebbe? Isn't Rav's concern only about the possibility about not being true to form on your Nidarim, and maybe you're collecting a second time? Then she pipes up and she stands up and she says, Chai Hashem tzivakos im nehenesi miksuvasi klum. I promise you, in the name of Hashem, she says, I did not get anything from my husband. That money is deserving to me, and I want to make a neder. And the Gemara says, in the name of Rav Huna, Amar Rav Huna, this is an amazing pivot, because this we didn't see earlier. Amar Rav Huna, Mode Rav bekofetzes. He agrees in a case of kofetzes that when a woman jumps up and says something, says a neder, we assume that she's telling the truth. Take a look at Rashi, which is almost halfway down in the Rashi's Dibur Hamaschel bekofetzes. Hoel vekofza v'nishba'a hare nishba'a v'gova. This type of shavua is actually considered acceptable. When a woman blurts out in the middle, no, you're wrong, this is actually what happened, and she says what actually happened, so then we actually do trust her. And Amar Rav Huna Moder, next line, 3/4 of the way down. Hahi de asoy lekame de Rabba bar Rav Huna. There was a woman who came before Rabba, who was the son of Rav Huna. Now we're in the next generation. The previous sugya was with Rav Huna. This is with the son of Rav Huna, Rabba. Amar la ma yavedlich de Rav lo migbik suva le'armalta. What can I do? I'm so sorry, said Rabba. I can't help you. I know you're an almana, but my father is Rav Huna, and my father's Rebbe is Rav, and I have no way to get you out of this circumstance. You're trapped between a rock and a hard place. What am I supposed to do? So Amra Le, she said to him, oh, sorry, I skipped a line. Ve'Abba Mari lo megabe, and my father as well, lo megabe ksuba le'armalta. Nobody, not my father, not my Rebbe, none of them allow for this to happen. I'm very sorry. So she said, well, fine, I understand if you can't get me my ksuba, but Amrale havli mizoni, at the very least, get me some food out of the deal, just a couple of meals, whatever I'm deserving. So Amar says to her, Mizoni nami leslich, you're not allowed to have food anymore, because once you're asking for your ksuba, that means you're no longer benefiting from the family, and therefore you're done. You're not allowed to have mizonos either. To Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, hatovas ksubasa bebezdin ein la mizonos. There's one moment in time where multiple things happen. When a woman goes to Bezdin and says, I want my ksuba, two things happen. Ideally, she gets paid, which in this case she won't. But the second thing that happens is that the second she says, I want my ksuba, she loses rights to mizonos. So this woman came before Rabbah, who was the son of Rav Huna, and Rav Huna was the Talmud of Rab. And she said, I'm an almana, please give me my money. He says, I can't give you your money. I'm sorry, I'm a Talmud of Rab. There's nothing I can do. And she said, please give me mizonos. He said, I can't give you that either, because hatovas ksubasa bebez and ein lon mizonos. She's done with her food. So she was a very unhappy woman, and she said something that really wasn't great. Two lines toward the end of the thin lines on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Amra le avchuha lekorse kibei trei. Says the Gemara, that I hope the chair falls over on you, which was some type of euphemism for death. Says the Gemara, avdali, and havchua lekorse. The students, what they did is they tried to flip over the chairs to break the euphemism. She was using the flipping of the chairs as a euphemism. They flipped the chairs without it so that he wouldn't die. They tried to save him by taking her homily, which was understood to be a curse, and correcting it. And the Gemara says, "Ve'afilu hachi," even though they did that, lo ifrak michulsha, they didn't save him. Ifrak in Aramaic is to save. They didn't save him from getting ill. Maybe they prevented him from dying, but they certainly didn't save him from getting ill. Amar le Rav Yehuda, the Rav Yirmiyah bira adra bebezdin. If a woman were to make a neder in Bezdin, ve'ashbe'a chutzla Bezdin, or if she makes a shvua outside of Bezdin, then v'leisi kala, I'd like you to announce it loudly. V'leipul be'udne debeina ki hechidei abid b'maisa. I want everyone to know about it. Now, there's a subtlety in this Gemara, which sometimes when we learn Gemaras, we overlook the names. And here what's happening is that we're actually seeing a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel being articulated. Rav, as we know, was very strict and did not allow for an almana to collect money at all because she couldn't make a shvuah. Here, Shmuel held differently. Shmuel held that a woman could be adra bebezdin and she could be mashbia chutz lebezdin, and that was his shita. So basically, halacha l'maisa, we have a big machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. Rav was very strict and wouldn't allow for an almana to collect. Shmuel was very lenient and he would allow for an almana to collect as long as the shvuah was made outside of Bezdin. So that's what the Gemara says. Now let's analyze this. We're 5 lines from the bottom on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. The Gemara says as follows. Gufa, we had just seen earlier, Amar Rav Zera, Amar Shmuel, Lo Shanu Ela Almana. What we had learned about in our Mishnah was only true by an almana. It was only true by a woman who lost her husband. Aval grusha, but when it comes to a grusha, to a woman who's divorced, things are different. Then mashbiyan osa, we do allow her to make a shvuah. And the Gemara says, ugrusha di idralo. Is a grusha not allowed to make a neder? Of course she is. After all, v'hashalchu mitam, we got a sugya, a shaila that was written up, a response that was brought from Eretz Yisrael. That's mitam over there. That's what they said in Bavel. And that case that was brought from Eretz Yisrael said as follows: Ech plonisa vas ploni, a woman in particular, kibilas gita min yada, she got a get from the Acha bar Hidayah. That was his name, Acha bar Hidayah, or he had another name, Demiskari Ayamari. And what did she do? She was divorced. Vinadart. She made a neder. And what happened? What was a neder? She was saying, I really am owed this money. And if I'm not telling the truth, she had said, I make a promise that I never got any money from my ksuva. The only thing I got were the following. Ella, what did she receive? She had received a glufkira echad. And here in the Mesoras Hashas, a glufkira, he says here in the commentaries, is a ksus ovesh al tzemer, a very thick wool blanket of some kind. According to some, it's a coat. That's what Rashi over here says. Ella glufkara. Rashi in the bottom line says kuta, which is, I guess, a French word for coat. I'm not exactly sure what the etymology is, but Rashi certainly seems to be saying that. And then the Gemara continues and says that was one thing she received, and the Sefer Tehillim, had a Sefer on the shelf that she got from her husband, and Sefer Tehillim Echad, the Sefer Iyov, Umem Shalos, and Beluim. These were, Rashi over here says Umem Shalos, the Sefer Mishlei. An interesting way to refer to Sefer Mishlei is Mem Shalos. These are the book of parables, and Beluim, they were worn down. Turning to the top of Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis, and we're going to be going 2/3 of the way down to the Iboyalu at the beginning of the line. And the Shamnum, the Chachamim estimated that was worth B'chamisha Mana L'Cheshetaboli Yedchem Hagavoa Es Hashar, and she was hoping to get the rest. So what we see from here is that a Gerusha can make a neder. Oh, so we have a stira. How can it be that in the first source we saw that a Gerusha cannot make a neder? But in this story, in the case of Shalchu Mitam that they got from Eretz Yisrael, it's clearly stated that she made a neder. So which one is it? Says the Gemara, 2 lines from the top on Lamed Hey Amud Beis, Amar Rav Ashi, Hahu get Yavamin Hava. That wasn't a regular get. It was a get Yavamin. In the case of get Yavamin, the rules are different, and you can't compare it to a regular case of get. But by a regular case of get, we assume that a Gerusha is not allowed to make a neder to extract any money from the ksuba. That brings us to the 2 dots on Lamed Hey Amud Beis, 3 lines down, quoting our Mishnah, Hiskin Rabban Gamliel Hazakin Sheteino Deres, that a woman can make a pretty extreme neder to say that in the event that I'm lying, I'll never eat fruits or vegetables ever again. She's allowed to make something very extreme. The Gemara instantly qualifies this. Amar Rav Huna lo shanu ela b'shelo nises. This is only true that she could make this extreme neder instead of a shvua, as long as she's not married. Aval nises, but if she is already married, ein madirin osa. Says the Gemara, nises my time. Why is it that if she's married? Because if she's married, as we've learned about extensively in Maseches Nadarim, the husband can just undo it. The husband can say, de mefer la baal. The husband can undo it. And says the Gemara, kilo nises nami, even if she made a shvur while she wasn't married, so what? L'chi minseba mefer la baal. That maybe the husband can undo the shvua even after she gets married, and therefore, why are we allowing her to make a shvua from before she gets married? And the Gemara says that can't be. 8, 9 lines down, because ein habal mefer b'kodmin. We learned about this multiple times in Maseches Nadarim, that a husband cannot touch Nadarim that were made before they were married. So if she made a neder beforehand, there's nothing that can be done whatsoever. Says the Gemara, v'neichush, perhaps Dilma, azla legabe chacham v'shari. Maybe she undid the neder on her own. The Gemara says, not really, because savar tzarach lefaret es neder. This is a case where she'd have to be mefaret es neder, and a neder like this, they would not be mefaret, because she's making a neder that she never collected the get. They wouldn't be made for that neder because it's a true neder. Rav Nachman Amar afilu nises, that you can even she can even make the shvua, she can even make the neder even if she's married. Nisei, says the Gemara, wait 1 second, vadai mefer lo baal. Says the Gemara, you're right, it's true that a husband could be made for any neder, but over here there's one difference. And says the Gemara, a little bit of an ukimta, to madrinan la berabim, that the neder she made is berabim. When a neder is made berabim, a husband cannot be made for the neder. A neder can only be made for barab, can only be made for if she made it with less than 10 people around. So again, a nukimta of sorts. Meisvei, says the Gemara, we have a kasha. Nises, if she was married, then gova ksuvasa im nadra. She can collect the ksuva if she made a neder. My lab, isn't this the case that nadra hashta, that she made the neder now that she's already married? Says the Gemara, no, not necessarily. Lo, perhaps the nadra may ikara. Perhaps that she made the neder while she was only engaged by Erusin and not b'nesuin. So says the Gemara, V'hatanya, wait 1 second. Nises no deres v'gova ksuvasa. We have another source that's much more clear that in fact she made this neder while she was married. And that's against the shita of Rav Huna that we saw. That Rav Huna, at the open of this Gemara toward the top of the page by the two dots, where Rav Huna said that the din of Rabban Gamliel HaZaken, that a woman can make a neder instead of a shvuah, is only true if she's not married. This brisa is black on white. The Gemara responds halfway down, you're 100% correct. Really, Tanoihi. There is a machlokes Tanoim in regards to this case. De'ika laman de Omar, neder shehudar berabim yeshlo hafara. There are those who say that if a woman were to make a neder berabim, then there still is hafara from the husband. De'ika laman de Omar, ein lo hafara. And some say that there is no hafara berabim, and therefore it's just a machlokes Tanoim. And we really don't know exactly where the line falls in regards to the qualification of Rav Huna. Let's review this last piece and then we'll stop. Rav Huna had tried to give a qualification to Rabban Gamliel HaZaken. Rabban Gamliel HaZaken said, we don't want a woman to make a shvuah. We're concerned about the power of shvuahs, but they can still make a neder. For example, a woman can make a neder and say, I never will eat fruits ever again if I'm lying about the ksuba. Please give me my ksuba. Rabban Gamliel says that's mutter. The qualification that Rav Huna gives is that it's only true if you're not yet married, but if you're married, it doesn't work anymore. And what we have found is that is actually a machlokes Tanoim. According to some people, and we don't know who's who really, we have no idea other than Rav Huna's and Amora, we don't know who the Tanaim are, but the Tanaim seem to have an argument as to whether or not a woman can make this neder even after she is married. We'll stop right here. Tomorrow night we'll pick up in Yiras Hashem with Iboy Eluhu, 2/3 of the way down. Wishing you all a beautiful night.